I'm joined now by Elizabeth Hurley. You know her from Austin Powers, Bedazzled, The Royals, and so much more. And now she's in Marvel's Runaways. Good morning.
Good morning, Zach.
I'm so glad to have you here because as we were just chatting about Bedazzled, iconic film, and I'm going to ask you about that later. But you know, little 13-year-old gay me is screaming right now.
Oh, sweet. Very sweet.
So before we jump in, you are playing Morgan Le Fay in The Runaways, which is in its final season. Let's take a look before we talk about it.
What would you like, Nico? I'm here for you.
I have to find Carolina.
You want to save her?
I love her.
I know. Carolina is alive. She's waiting for you. But she's trapped.
Will you help me?
I already have.
All right. So what was it like to join the Marvel Universe?
Well, it was a very fresh and interesting thing for me to do. I hadn't previously really been a comic book sort of fan in that I hadn't really watched their name. And we had comics when I was a little girl, but they weren't superheroes and villains fighting. They were more like, you know, schoolgirls fighting over hairbrushes and stuff, as opposed to zapping people.
Yeah, I mean, you have like lightning powers and things.
I have powers, and I have to say, I always secretly wanted to have superpowers. So it was stepping into a brand new world, and of course, a brand new world of fans who are in a league of their own.
Yes.
The comic book fans.
Yes.
So, you know, any experience is a great experience if it's a new one for me. So I have to say I love it, and I love being a supervillain. And even though I am quite a mean one, it was, I mean, every day was hysterical at work. I loved it. I loved putting on my costume, and I loved zapping those kids.
I mean, who doesn't want to do that? I want to zap children every day.
I want to zap many people every day. Forget about just children. But, yeah, no, so actually it released some kind of something in me that needed to be done.
I love that. So this final season, it has a crossover between Cloak and Dagger, which is getting people very, very, very excited. And you mentioned that you were not familiar with comics before, so how did you prepare for this?
Well, it's interesting because my character is, even though, of course, she is a legend, not necessarily real, even though she may well have existed sometime in the 11th century, there's a great deal of stuff on Morgan Le Fay. She's come into many, many different types of literature, all the way back to the 11th century, all the way to movies like Excalibur, and certain Marvel things have also pulled Morgan Le Fay a little bit, but not so very much yet. So there was a lot to pull on, both legend, the way she's been portrayed before in modern stuff in the media. So I looked a great deal at all of that stuff, and then I also looked at how people dealt. I mean, as an actress, what's strange for us is to know how people act when they're suddenly in their leotard, as opposed to being in their real clothes.
Really?
Yeah, because your character's also in their real clothes, and then in your leotard, and so it's
Never thought of
no,
this.
I know, and that's what's so weird, because do you just carry on talking as we're talking now, but you're in a leotard?
Do you find your physicality changing or voice changing?
Well, that's just it. Does it or doesn't it? And that's what you have to decide. And the interesting thing with the way Marvel's normally played is that it doesn't change.
Okay.
They're just as if we're sitting here, but you could be in your supervillain costume, and I would be too, but we're still just sitting here. And that, for me, was the biggest thing to try and establish how that happens. Because with my character in this, when you first see me, I'm actually in the different characters. I've managed to infiltrate her mind. So I could be a fantasy. And then when you next see me, I'm in normal clothes, but still, obviously, my character. And then, but then before we then go fully into being in my comic book character, there is sometimes when I'm striding around in my leotard when everybody else is in normal clothes. And those are the scenes that made me go, and how do I play this? But that's the joy of being in a comic book.
Yeah.
You know, you can actually, there isn't really a right or a wrong. I guess you could just choose how to in your leotard, but just sitting on a sofa. Yes.
Leotard. I wish you would have sat on the sofa in a leotard. I would have died.
I kind of wish I were too. I could have just done my PR in my costume.
Great. Yeah. So, you know, this may be your first time playing a villain in a leotard, but it's not your first time playing a villain. And we mentioned Bedazzled already, and that's where you play Satan. I think you're the
Yes.
best Satan that's ever been. in
Oh,
any
you are
movie.
kind. Thank
Truly
you.
fantastic. But why do you think that film has really resonated with people for so long? Because even before this, I was talking to other gays in the office, and they were like, Bedazzled, best thing ever.
Oh, that's hysterical. Well, I mean, it's pretty camp.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a camp movie, and the hair's great, the costumes are great, the references are great back to, you know, whether it was Rita Hayworth or whoever we were sort of channeling in each time the devil came up with a different persona. Yeah, and I guess it's just, yeah, it's quite charming.
It is quite. And, you know, that character has become so iconic, but also you've played other iconic roles, such as in Austin Powers. Who do you think you get recognized more as on the street? Do people still come up to you and talk about those?
They do. Yeah, they do. Probably Bedazzled, mostly. But then when I took a long break when I was raising my son, but then when I came back and did a show called Gossip Girl, people loved Gossip Girl.
Yes.
And a lot of people, but they're all evil parts. Apart from Austin Powers, where I was allowed to be sweet, I've only ever really played quite evil villains.
Or a fembot.
Yes, evil. That's true. Well, she went to be evil very briefly in the second movie, I think. But ever since then, it's always a villain. So in Gossip Girl, I was a villain, and in The Royals, of course, I was a villain. In this, I'm definitely a villain.
Yeah.
So I think I'm just now cast as Little Miss Nasty.
Are you enjoying this villain spree?
It's actually fun.
It looks really fun.
Yeah,
it looks really fun. So, you know, you mentioned Austin Powers, and you did become a villain in that movie. Would you do the fourth one if they greenlit it soon? Because I know it's still, like, being discussed. It's not really true it's happening.
Oh, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's I don't think anybody wants to step back and try and recreate something when you're 20 years older.
Yeah.
I think if there's a way that something's organically progressed, but I don't think anybody wants to run around in the costumes they were wearing 20 years ago. Mind you, I have to say, in Marvel, I was aware that I was wearing a green version of my red costume from Bedazzled. It's kind of the same.
I was going
The
to
leotard
say,
is back.
Girl, it tracks.
It's true.
It's like
it
really...
does. I know. I was aware of that. And interestingly enough, when we started shooting, there was a very nice man who was blowing, when we were doing all the blue screen stuff, he was blowing my hair with, you know, one of those wind machines. Then he came up to me and he went, "The last time I blew your hair for a wind machine was Bedazzled 20 years ago at Fox Studios." He said, "But I think you're wearing the same costume." Yeah, in a different colour. Yeah, nothing changes.
God, that's amazing. Well, at least in The Royals, you did not wear the same costume. It's
I did not.
looks as the Queen.
Yes.
And, you know, I have to know, when you were playing that role, did it make you think about the Queen differently, or at least being a royal differently?
Well, I didn't think about the real Queen of England, because ours was fictional, and obviously there wasn't really much correlation between me and her. But it did, to be honest, actually, it made me feel a little jealous.
Really?
Because it really made me realise that, because on our show, you saw us out and about as royalty, bestowing goodness and grace on the general public. But then, of course, you went behind closed doors and saw what we were all getting up to behind closed doors. But then you really realised that with the real royal family, you never see behind closed doors, ever. We only ever see them bestowing, you know, nice things on the outside. You never see anything else, unlike people in show business, where, unfortunately, pesky people seem to get behind the scenes all the time. So, actually, they're really lucky. Because I always think of the royal family as being sort of like showbiz, really, because it is.
Yeah.
But with a lot more privacy.
Yeah, they have a lot
sometimes.
more.
Maybe they've lost a little lately. But on the whole, they have more privacy.
Yeah, so historically they've had more privacy, but and you have not. I mean, paparazzi
No,
chased you
I haven't
for
had that much.
years and years and years. I mean, I still remember the iconic paparazzi photos of you in that dress with the Versace dress.
Yes.
So what do you think about the recent revelations with Meghan and Harry? They're dealing with life more like celebrities, more like you. Are you seeing it that way?
They're not really, because they still have the Secret Service looking after them. And they still have the Palace Guard, and there's no cameras backstage. So they don't really. They still have a great deal more protection than people in show business.
Yes.
But, you know, we are of an age where perhaps more people who could have more privacy choose, in some ways, to be a little more open and to reveal a little more than perhaps their predecessors did. And I guess that's a choice.
Yeah, it is a change. It's a change. Well, we want to switch gears a little bit and look at some Instagram photos that you've posted, because I love your Instagram. Okay. And we have this picture from the holidays a few years ago with you and your son, Damien.
Yes, he wouldn't want me to do that now.
You know, so that's my question. It's like, is this your Christmas card every year? Are we expecting?
Well, yeah, you see, I have a beachwear company called, it was quite imaginative when I named it. It's called Elizabeth Hurley Beach. So we always normally do a beach card to just go out and be silly in.
Okay.
And then I used to doctor them for my family card and put my son on them. But he won't let me do that anymore.
Why not?
Well, I have him flying through the air as a little elf. No, he's 17. He's a grown-up man, so I'm not allowed to do that.
All right. So what are y'all going to be doing this holiday season? Do you have any traditions you like to partake in?
Well, all my family come to me because I've got a house in the country where there's room for everyone. So I'm having a huge gang of people, family and friends, to stay with me for the whole period, from the 23rd until the 2nd.
Wow.
Yeah.
Why for so long? That makes me anxious.
That's what we do in England.
Okay.
But it's interesting because I've been in other countries for Christmas before, and it's like a day. We give up. Everybody stops work the nearest Friday to Christmas. I think it's the 23rd this year. And no one goes back to work until the 2nd or 3rd. Everyone just sits and eats chocolate and watches television and argues. Basically for 12 days.
Are there not any other traditions that happen during that time? Like a turkey?
Yeah, we have all that. We eat. We eat a great deal. There's non-stop eating. But, you know, if you're cooped up with people for 12 days, you always end up bickering too.
Oh, my God. Do you have any tips for how to get through a bickering match with someone?
I go to my bedroom. I spend a lot of time in my bedroom.
You're like, I locked this
I just hide, yeah. I take the dogs upstairs and lie on my bed for a bit.
Oh, I love that. I love it. I'm going to be doing that in a few weeks too. So thank you for that tip. Well, thank you so much for being here today. It's been lovely catching up, and congratulations on the final season.
Thank you.
It's going to be great. Well, season 3 of Marvel's Runaways premieres this Friday on Hulu.